Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the July 14th, 2021 reconvening of the Miami-Dade TPO's Free Transportation Advisory Committee, FTAC for short. My name is Kevin Walford. I'm the FTAC coordinator, and I'll be in control of this particular meeting today. Next slide. On today's agenda, we have two items, one being presentation from the Florida Harbor Pilots, and the second one being FDOT's Northwest 36th Street multimodal study. Hope, as we know, one of our FTAC members, Bill Arada, is with the Harbor Pilots, so hopefully he'll be here today. The next workshop, as you can see on the calendar, is Wednesday, September 15th, 2021. And this is where I said, George, to stay tuned. This is our first meeting, as you know, since April, because the May and June meetings were canceled. We didn't have any items. And then next month in August, the FTAC will take a recess, as do all of the TPO's advisory committees. In September, when the FTAC reconvenes, that meeting will be held in person. This meeting today is the last of the virtual meetings on Zoom and so forth for the FTAC, along with all the other committee meetings. So we will resume like we did pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, meeting in person. The location and so forth are yet to be determined. We'll be working that out over the next 2 months, or month, I should say. I know we met in person. We met in person at the Medley Town Hall, where George is. We've also met at the Durality Hall. So we'll be reaching out to the various municipalities and other partners we've had these meetings in locations for, to see who would be available, and getting back on the regular schedule and so forth. All right, next slide. The rules of engagement. I'm going to read them out for any individuals who may be listening on the phone. This workshop is being held virtually and is being recorded. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact Lisa Wan at the phone number and email address you see on the screen, and so she can assist you. All attendees will remain muted throughout the duration of this workshop. If you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise hand button. The chair, meaning me, will first acknowledge you, then your microphone will be unmuted. Please proceed by first providing your full name, agency represented, and then your comment. Your microphone will remain unmuted until the comment has been fully addressed. In compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, no actions or motions shall be permitted. Discussions shall be limited to matters listed in the published workshop agenda. Permissible discussions include presentations, questions and answers, and any comments related to the presentations. Any committee member deviating from these guidelines will be reminded as to the limitations on any such discussion. Please hold all comments until presentations are concluded. Next slide. All right, so the first presentation is going to be from the Florida Harbor Pilots, and that's going to be Laura DeBella. I hope I pronounced your last name right, correct, Laura?
You did, yes.
Okay. All right, you're up to bat.
I love the guy in the coat and tie coming up from the water. It's like a James Bond movie.
Is that Bill?
Yeah.
Is that Bill Arada?
Yeah.
They take their job extremely seriously, including how they look. So it is it's very much professional, through and through is how they present themselves. So thank you very much, Kevin. I really appreciate this opportunity. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm sorry that I am the last of the virtual meetings that you have here, but I promise I'll hopefully make it as interesting for you. And congratulations on being able to meet in person again. So I know we all been waiting for those days across the board. So My name is Laura DeBella. I am the executive director for the Florida Harbor Pilots Association. Kevin and I sit on the Florida Freight Transportation Committee for FDOT, the advisory committee, and that's how this introduction came about and this presentation. I have been in my position for just about a year and a half now, a little bit over that. November will be 2 years. I am not a harbor pilot, and I'm going to go ahead and start with that. I have asked Captain Jeffrey Poole with the Biscayne Bay Pilots to join me today, as he is the expert. He is not only a harbor pilot for the Biscayne Pilots, he's also chairman of the Biscayne Bay Pilots. So he will get very much into what the pilots do in Miami and how they are, how they represent you and certainly facilitate your economy and protect your environment. But my job, my only job in life is to help them do their job better, in every way, shape, and form. So, and we'll talk about a little bit about that today, but then I will hand it over to Captain Poole to talk a little bit more deeply about Miami. Before I get into that, my past life, as I said, I'm not a harbor pilot. My past life, I come from the port world. I come from the dry land side, seaport and economic development side of the equation. Both of those it took about just less than a decade of my life. And then prior to that, I was commercial real estate, which afforded me the opportunity to live all over the state, including Miami, twice in my life. So Miami Beach was my home, and I worked on Brickell Avenue in what used to be called the Espiritu Santo Plaza, which is where the Conrad Hotel is. Looked way different back then. So I've watched Miami grow in many ways, wearing many hats. And once again, I work with TPO agencies, in my past lives. So I certainly know what you do and I appreciate what you do. So thank you. And thank you for this time. So with that, I will get started. Once again, Florida Harbor Pilots Association. We are a statewide association that is only comprised of our harbor pilots. We were founded in 1868. We've been around for a very long time. They're comprised of 11 member associations, or you want to call them stations, that represent nearly 100 highly skilled and highly trained harbor pilots that serve each of Florida's 14 operating deep water seaports. Now, I just want to point out nearly, why the word nearly is there is because we're always working on a new deputy and retirement schedule. So there's a roll on, roll off that's continuous, but the number of harbor pilots that serve our state is set by the state in statute. So we are regulated, state regulated, however, we are not state funded, and we will get into that in the next slide, please. All of our harbor pilot stations, like the Biscayne Bay Pilots, are independent for-profit businesses. They receive, to keep it simple, a commission off of each ship handle that comes in and out of our seaport. And it's all based on the gross tonnage of the vessel. It's a formula, basically. And that is how they are funded and how they do what they do, their service to the state. I put this in caps because I have to reinforce it again and again and again, because it's an often misunderstood situation that our harbor pilots and what they do not receive any taxpayer dollars for their service. Not one, not one. They stand up completely on their own. Next slide. Now I'm going to go through just who all of our harbor pilot associations are. Obviously, we have the Biscayne Bay Pilots, who you will learn more about today. On to the next slide, please. Then we have our Port Everglades Pilots. Next slide. Palm Beach Pilots. One more. Palm Beach Pilots, again, represent the Port of Fort Pierce. Not all harbor pilot associations, actually, I'm going to pause for a moment because I did not mention that before. Each of our harbor pilot stations represent their seaports and their seaports alone. They do not, unless there is a cross-license opportunity like we have here at the Port of Fort Pierce, they do not represent more than one port. They are the subject matter experts for their specific seaport channels. And again, I will talk about this some more, but again, Palm Beach pilots operate both at the Port of Palm Beach and also the Port of Fort Pierce. We can move on to the next slide, please. Canaveral pilots operate at Port Canaveral. Next slide, please. St. John's Bar pilots this is Jacksport in this picture. And then in the following picture, this is Port of Fernandina. So once again, a two-shot deal where one pilot station handles two ports that are close in proximity. Moving on to the next slide. We have St. Andrews Bay pilots. This is the Port of St. Joe, the up and coming Port of St. Joe that recently was resurrected after being relatively dormant for about 20 years. So this is over in the Panhandle of Florida. And then next slide. St. Andrews Bay pilots also handle the extremely busy Port of Panama City. So again, those two ports are in close proximity, and that's why they handle that as well. And then the next slide is our Pensacola Bay pilots, which, as the name indicates, they handle the Port of Pensacola. And then our next slide is our Tampa Bay pilots, and this is our final of the three. Our Tampa Bay pilots actually handle three seaports: Port Tampa Bay, Port St. Pete, and also Port Manatee. Moving on to the next slide. And then Key West Bar pilots handle the Port of Key West. Sorry, how can I forget my friends down there? So that is the rounds out our pilot groups. So we just took a ride around the state with you. So getting into what I was saying before, like I said, we are state regulated. Our harbor pilot groups are state regulated. Per Florida law, no foreign flag vessel or vessel over 7 feet of draft can enter or exit any of our seaports without a state licensed pilot on board. This is for one reason and one reason only, and it is to protect the state. It is to protect the state's most precious economic and environmental assets, which are its seaport channels and the coastal environment that surrounds it. We can move on to the next slide because I'll be covering some information on here. Like I said, the protecting the state is number one. Like I had mentioned before, their local knowledge, their subject matter experts, they understand every square inch of that channel, every square inch of those waterways. It is their job to know that. They test on that. They're rigorously trained and have a heavy amount of sea time under their belt. And I'm sure I don't want to steal Captain Pool's thunder as far as what he had to do in order to get here, but it is extensive and it is demanding because of the responsibilities they carry. They are responsible for not only our economy, they're responsible for our environment, they're responsible for our infrastructure, and obviously our seaport channel. We learned very well, and the world learned very well, what happens when a ship gets stuck somewhere when we had the Ever Given come through. So that is a situation that we do not want in Florida ever, ever, ever in any way, shape, or form. And it is up to our harbor pilots, and it's their responsibility to ensure that that doesn't happen. So our Florida is unique in that our channels are very narrow compared to other states. Again, Captain Poole can get into, where, where Miami falls in the broad spectrum, but I know it's on the smaller end. But we don't have the luxury that other states have, in that their seaport channels can handle 1,000+ feet in width. We really a one in, one out type of scenario here. And especially when you travel south, to our southern seaport channels, they're largely dynamited limestone. So a potential grounding could prove to be very disastrous, as we're not dealing with sand, we're dealing with rock. that would, blast a hole into a ship, into a hull. So it is, again, the responsibility is very big, and the margin of error is very small, and that's why our harbor pilots are very good. And we will obviously talk about that some more. Next slide, please. Well, as I was saying, protecting the state interests from all sorts of things, capsized ships, that's a Concordia on the left, that's an oil spill on the top right, and then obviously that's a bad weather event that toppled a bunch of containers, at sea. So on the bottom, there's so many things that could happen that again is not anything we would ever want or wish for. If we go on to the next slide. The MV Golden Ray is another more local event that has garnered a lot of attention. Nearly 2 years has this ro-ro carrier been on its side. Now it's in pieces up at by the Port of Brunswick in the St. Simons Sound. And I don't think anybody could have imagined that it would have taken this long to remove this ship. Thankfully, it was moved out of the channel. But again, a situation like this is not something that we would ever want here in Florida. And that's why we train and only accept really the best of the best. And Captain Poole, they get mad at me sometimes when I speak this way, but it's not because I'm paid for it. It's true. Our pilots undergo so much training at sea before they can even qualify to be a harbor pilot, well over a decade at sea. And then once they have the opportunity to test as a pilot here in the state of Florida, only the best of the best gets selected as a harbor pilot. And then after that, they are trained for 2 to 3 years, depending on what seaport they test and win. So talk about commitment. There is a large amount of commitment, close to 2 decades worth of commitment there before they even become a harbor pilot. So just to give you an idea of the skill and the talent that we are so lucky to have here. You're welcome, Captain Poole. Next slide. What do they handle? Okay, pilots handle pretty much everything, and I'm going to go over that quickly. They handle container on the left, cargo on the right. Next slide. Cruise ships are handled by harbor pilots. Tankers are handled by harbor pilots. Military vessels, unbeknownst to many, are handled by harbor pilots. Submarines, also unbeknownst to many, are handled by harbor pilots. Yachts are also handled by harbor pilots, and rockets are handled by harbor pilots. Actually, the rockets on the barge. So that's there in Canaveral. And next slide, I believe that we got my last. I added those there. So that kind of gives you the full, 30,000 foot view of harbor pilots and who they are, who we are as an association. I have the privilege to introduce you to the Biscayne Bay Pilots and Captain Jeffrey Poole, who was able to make it here with us today. So if I will save the questions, I guess, to the end, if that would be easiest. And Captain Poole, I'll hand it off to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Jeff Poole. I started with the Biscayne Bay Pilots in 2011. So September will be 10 years for me in Port Miami. Prior to that, I was sailing on large vessels with Military Sea Lift Command, directly supporting the U.S. Navy as a civilian. I did 5.5 years doing that, traveling all over the world, and obtained an unlimited master's captain's license. And before that, I went to and graduated from the United States Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York. Again, got to Miami in 2011. The training program in Miami is 3 years. Then we become full-fledged pilots. And this past January, I took over as the chairman of our association. To give you a little background about how do you become a pilot, and what a pilot, so to speak, does. It really just depends on which state we're in. So since we're in Florida, we'll stay with Florida. Each state legislates how they want to do their pilotage for state pilotage, which primarily handles international vessels, vessels under an international flag, or vessels doing international voyages. So for Florida, they have some minimum requirements, and then it is a come one, come all, best score wins test. The requirements to sit for the test are a United States Coast Guard second mate's license, and having had the license for 2 years and sailed on the license for at least 1 year. And then you sit for the test. The test is a 2-part test. Each part is 4 hours. The first 4 hours is all multiple choice, probably 60% true or false. The rest is 4 option multiple choice. The second 4 hours is a drawing the chart of the port you are studying for from memory. Essentially, you get a massive piece of white paper with the landmarks for that port drawn in, and everything else is blank. So for Miami, for example, you would have had Dodge Island, where the port is located. You'd have all the MacArthur Island, South Beach, Fisher Island. But as far as where the buoys are, what the characteristics are of those buoys, what color they are, what color the lights are for the buoys, how often those lights are on and off, that is all from memory, and where exactly they are in the channel relative to the land masses. All comes from memory. Names of the berths at the port, where the underwater sewage lines are, where the underwater telephone lines are, power lines, what are the depths in various areas offshore and inshore. All of that stuff we memorize, and then over the course of 4 hours do our best to regurgitate and regurgitate accurately. And at the same time, it's all competitive. So, and as competitive as it can be, it'll come down to hundredths of a percent as far as who gets a spot and who doesn't get a spot. The state of Florida will advertise any openings. Essentially, each port, each pilot group will evaluate who they have retiring. It's typically what drives openings in the ports. Sometimes it is traffic driven. If traffic dramatically increases or decreases, that will change the number of pilots required. But for the most part, it's based off retirements. So if a pilot group is anticipating multiple retirements or just one, they'll ask the state for a deputy pilot exam to try and bring in a new pilot. They take the test. They probably sit in a room for those 2 tests, the 2 4-hour tests, with about 30 to 40 other people all trying for the same spot. Tests get graded. Whoever has the top score is picked, and they show up like I did in Miami 10 years ago, and you start training from scratch. Again, our training program is 2.5 years long. It is a stepped program. So for the first 4 months, it's purely observation. And then it is a slowly gradual stepped process where the second step, hey, okay, Jeff, you're allowed to go and pilot ships of 300 feet or less. And as I said, it's gradually increased from there to the point that you become unlimited. You take a final state pilot exam, pass that, and you're now christened a state pilot for the port of Miami. At the same time we do that, there's a whole separate type of pilotage called federal pilotage, which the state pilots in Miami and all the other ports in Florida also obtain. And that is for U.S. flagged vessels engaging in interstate commerce. So if somebody's trying to bring a fuel barge from Jacksonville to Fisher Island, the fuel terminal there, we'll get on those and pilot those as well. And that's a whole separate licensing process outside of the state of Florida that's done totally through the U.S. Coast Guard. So that's how we got here. That's my background. what do we do on a normal basis? As Laura talked about, we pretty much get on everything that floats in and out of the port of Miami and Biscayne Bay. So as she talked about, largest cruise ships in the world, Symphony of the Seas, some of the largest container ships in the world, 1,200 feet long, 4 football fields, 160 feet wide, 15,000 containers on board, mega yachts. We piloted, NFL owner yachts, English soccer team owner yachts, J-Lo's yacht coming in and out. We also do all the vessels going in and out of the Miami River. So all the little cargoes, ships. I don't know if you guys go down to the river and you see the bikes and the doors and the mattresses all stacked up on the ships. We do those too. So it's a very interesting and diverse job. And the ships change, on the hour. We can go from the massive cruise ship to the mega yacht to the Miami River questionable boat. So it's interesting to say the least. We are a 365, 24/7 operation. So when a fuel barge is coming in on Christmas Eve at 3 a.m., we're there. We run, as Laura said, as a small business. So we not only do we pilot the ships, but we also manage our property. We have currently in Miami, we have 4 pilot boats that we maintain and operate. They essentially act as a ferry service for us to get us to the ships offshore. We'll traditionally board the vessels 5 to 6 miles from the beach, bring them all the way in. And then when the ship leaves, our boats follow us all the way out 5 to 6 miles, pick us up and bring us all the way back in. That way we don't have to go to, China every time a container ship leaves. So we have employees that run those boats, maintain those boats. Obviously we employ them. We have our dispatchers. Together with our dispatchers, we act as a vessel control service and management system for the port of Miami. That's a little unique. Some have official vessel traffic services that are done through the county or cities. We handle it internally for Port Miami and work together with the Coast Guard in that aspect. So essentially, anything over, let's say, 150 feet that's moving in Port Miami is going through us at some point. Either it will have a pilot, and then its coming and going times are scheduled through us to try and make sure that everything that's moving is as efficient and safe as possible at all times. From the environmental standpoint, obviously, outside from the economic impact that the port itself brings, the water that we operate in is world famous, pristine, sea 40 feet to the bottom type water. So there's a huge responsibility on our end to keep it that way. And unlike a commercial interest that is only looking at, I've got passengers I need to get off the ship, I have containers I need to get off the ship, or a yacht owner that is oblivious to all of it and just wants to make his helicopter ride. Our interest is purely for safety and the efficiency of the port. And that is our priority. That is our mandate from the citizens of Florida and Miami-Dade County, to protect that engine and to protect that environment and to make sure that it's the same, if not better, every day we come to work. So trying to think if there's anything I missed in all of that. So the other things that we do, in some aspects, we do provide some security aspects that we work with the Coast Guard, FBI, Customs and Border Patrol with. We interact with all those agencies on a almost daily basis between the safety aspects and the security side of things, especially post 9/11. In 2001, we were ferrying Coast Guard officials out to cruise ships for security details. Now, since it's 20 years ago, so a lot of that stuff has ramped down, but we still act as the eyes and ears for those agencies on the bridges of the ship. Obviously, we have a bird's eye view of a lot of what's going on in and around the port. And we're there, as I said, 365, 24/7. So things that stick out, things that catch our eye, we're certainly aware of and report to the proper authorities. We're also involved in hurricane prep and post operations in close coordination, again, with Port Miami and the Coast Guard. We ensure that all vessels get out of the port in a timely fashion before tropical storm force winds show up. We also ensure that and assist with opening the port back up as soon as possible, because all of those ships in a normal year, you may have 7 or 8 full cruise ships that haven't been able to disembark the passengers for 8 days or 3 or 4 days past when they were supposed to fly out. They're hiding behind Cuba or the Bahamas until the storm passes, and then they're all waiting to get in to offload all those passengers as soon as possible. But we can't do that until we ensure that there's no sailboats sunk in the middle of the channel, all the buoys are in their correct position, all the lights are working, et cetera, and so forth. So us with the Coast Guard and Port Miami, we get out in our boats. We do early surveys of the port and the waterways to ensure, again, no wrecks, no containers that have flown from the port and are sticking up out of the water, all those sorts of things. So, yeah. Anyone have any questions?
Laura, I think you said there might be another slide after this or so.
There may be some, but it's everything that it's just lots of pictures. I loaded you all with pictures just so
Okay, no
everybody
problem.
understands, what they handle and what they look like. I guess one thing that I'd like to reinforce, which I think everybody is well aware of on this call, is that one big misconception about harbor pilots is that they're just a boat. They're vessels. Obviously the pilot vessel is what everybody sees. Nobody often sees unless I produce pictures to you like I have today, the actual pilot that comes alongside a ship, climbs up the rope ladder and proceeds to their job, which is the bridge of the ship. So they're I just like to say this anecdotally, I get asked often, they're like, oh, are they like the FAA, for an airplane? And I'm like, no, they are actually like the pilots of an airplane. The only difference between a harbor pilot and an airplane pilot is, an airplane pilot, mainly, I don't want to say is the only reason why they're there. They're there to make sure that the plane takes off and lands safely. Harbor pilots are there to make sure the ships take out, leave and come in safely. The only difference between an airplane pilot and harbor pilot is that the harbor pilot can actually get off, whereas the airplane pilot can't jump out of the plane. So they have to finish the voyage. So that is the simplest way that I explain to those that don't fully understand, what it is that it is that a harbor pilot does. So I just like to add that, here to you all today. But I believe, Captain Poole did a wonderful job, really getting into the details as far as, what it takes for them to become a pilot. But, really that especially in Miami, it's not this way in every port, but it is this way in Port Miami, that they manage that traffic. So for your purposes, they have the awareness, the wherewithal, the traffic patterns, when like everybody's trying to get to those cruise ships, when everybody's trying to get off those cruise ships, when they're running full bore, that is, and obviously the cargo congestion, the trucking and so on and so forth. So we had a discussion with DOT, FDOT a couple months ago, Captain Poole, and myself, and their consultants, kind of looking at seaport and waterways studies, and how to, how the state's gonna look at planning, moving forward from their perspective, and a lot of light bulbs went off, with their team and their consultants, because this was the first time that they had spoken to the pilots, and they realized just how much information they can. They can glean from them, especially those that handle the vessel traffic aspect, like the Biscayne Bay pilots do, and the others, of course. But that they're, they are the efficiency experts, when it comes to the transportation nodes altogether.
Yeah, so
Right,
to give
Jack?
you an
Sorry,
example
go ahead, Jeff.
of
Captain.
some of the stuff we do on that end, pre-COVID, during the winter months, that's kind of the cruise season in Miami. So you could have upwards of 7 to sometimes 9 cruise ships all trying to call Miami on the same day. And the way cruise ships operate, if any of you guys have ever done cruises and been up, they like to show up at the sea buoy ready to come in at 4:30, and they like to sail at 4 in the afternoon. And when you have 9 of them and they all want to come in at the exact same time, and they all want to leave at the exact same time, that doesn't work very well. So what we do together with the port is we gather all of the entities that have interests in it, mainly the ship agents, gather them together 2 to 3 months in advance of the winter season, and we start planning a month at a time, and negotiating what ship can come when, which side they go to. Some ships are faster than others, slower than others, depends on which berth they go to, and we make up lineups for each day, basically for the entire year at this point, at least pre-COVID. We hope to get back to those levels. And then once that's all set up, then we factor in the cargo ships, which we have significantly less lead time on because their schedules vary so much. And we plug and place the cargo ships into that parade of cruise ships as they come in and out to try and facilitate, again, an efficient maneuver and flow of traffic. And then the Miami River and the yachts are just, they pop up when they pop up, and we make do. So it's an involved process. Again, it takes us months to set it all up, and everyone is squeezed in. So I think some of the other stuff that Laura had mentioned that I kind of ran through and took a little bit for granted. The simplest way when people ask me what I do, and the way I put it, if you ignore all the other stuff that I talked about for the last 10 minutes, is we valet park skyscrapers on a daily basis. And I know that sounds a little, ostentatious, but if you look at the size of the ships and essentially what we do, and you boil it down, it's essentially a skyscraper on its side with a small little propeller on the back, and we drive it around in Port Miami on a daily basis. And we're really good at it. I know that doesn't sound very humble either, but if we weren't, you would see us on CNN a lot, and you never do, and you never hear about us, with the exception of the guy in Egypt. You haven't heard about pilots in a long time in the news, and that's a great thing. So we're happy to keep it that way. And yeah, the thing that Laura was talking about with Miami, some of the ports, like if you go to, say, New York, New Orleans, Charleston, they've got very wide rivers compared to Miami. You're talking 1,000, 2,000 feet wide. They have two-way traffic depending on weather and currents. Miami, we have a 500-foot wide channel. When you look at the bottom of the Mississippi River, for example, that is silt and mud. Silt and mud, though you don't necessarily want to touch it, it's much more forgiving than hard coral rock limestone, which we have here in Miami. So we have a very small channel with a very hard bottom. So there's no rubbing as racing in Miami. It is zero margin for error with the size of the ships that we have, with the environment that we operate in, the pristine water. You drop a thing of oil in there, everybody's going to see it. So again, we operate in a unique environment. We love operating here. Many of us worked a long time to get here, and we stay here for long periods of time. I have 2 partners at Port Miami that are in their 70s, and they've been working here for 40 years for one of them and 45 for the other. So it's a lot of passed down knowledge. The Biscayne Bay Pilots and ourselves, we've been here since 1911. So it's 110 years of service to Miami-Dade County. And basically what happens is a new pilot shows up and the other 18 pilots pass on that information to the new pilot. So you've got 110 years of experience, in theory, being passed from one generation of pilots to the next.
All right. Thank you, Captain Poole. I have some comments from the audience. Stanley, you want to go ahead? Stanley?
Yes, sorry about that. I was just unmuting. Thank you, Kevin, and great presentation, Jeffrey and Laura. Two quick questions I had as I'm listening to both you, Laura, and Jeffrey. You know, I'm interested in what's a typical salary for a harbor pilot, and has that increased over the years? And a similar question is, when you think about how other parts of other industry sectors, how they've evolved with innovation, and how has sort of this idea around technology and innovation evolved with this particular line of work?
So we'll start with the salary question first. We don't necessarily work on a salary per se. As a small business, we have a portion of the profits, the revenue, and that is divided amongst all the pilots. So as the Port of Miami goes and how many ships come and go from the Port of Miami, so go the pilots. And we are completely dependent on that. So, for example, our 2019 was a lot better than our 2020 and our 2021. Without the cruise ships, the pilots have been down 40, 50, sometimes 60% in a month compared to where we previously were. And those are all, that revenue is all based off of rates that the Board of Pilot Commissioners set. And we can petition for changes to those rates, but we cannot arbitrarily change those rates ourselves. So that's where a lot of that state regulation comes in. Our salaries are, they vary nationwide, but are on the higher end of well-paid professionals to be comparable to, lawyers or doctors, depending on the quality of the firm and medical practice. On the technology side, so I mentioned earlier how our channel hasn't gotten any bigger, and it's really hard at the bottom, but our ships have gotten wider and longer, and that's where the technology has come in. And that the technology has allowed us to stretch the size of the ships that are coming in per se. The biggest ships that were coming to Port Miami when I first got here were 965 feet long. The Symphony of the Seas, the largest cruise ship, is I think like 1,180 feet long, 212 feet wide. Some of the container ships we've seen are 1,206 feet long and 160 feet wide. And the channel has not widened offshore. It's still at 500 feet. So what we've been able to do with some of the GPS technology and iPad technology that we've utilized is essentially have a electronic chart display that is independent of the ship's equipment. For us to get, there's so many different ships, so many varying qualities of the personnel that are operating on those ships. For us to have our equipment that we're familiar with, we know how to work, and it's independent of the ship's equipment, which can vary in, status, quality, etc.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ross. How are you doing this afternoon?
Everybody mute themselves, please. Continue, Captain Poole.
Sure. So that allowed us to, expand those vessels into the same size channel and push some of those limits in a safe manner.
Okay, thank you. George, you had your hand up.
Hi, Captain Poole. Just a quick question. One of the slides had to do with the Golden Ray mishap in Mobile Bay. Any lessons, quick lessons learned from that case that you know, as pilots you keep in mind, or because that incident seemed to be, you know, the ship was coming out of Mobile Bay, right? We're loaded with cars, if I understand right, and all of a sudden it beached itself.
So you're talking about the port of Brunswick in Georgia, right?
Brunswick, right? Brunswick, yes.
So again, I'm going to be biased because I'm a pilot, but from my understanding is the stability of that ship was not great. And that's, you've seen ships come and go from Miami. You've never seen one just, you know, fall onto its side when it turns, right? So that one, it wasn't great. We call that a tender ship is the term that we use. When you turn, they kind of keep wanting to fall over on you. From what I understand is that the pilot kind of knew it at that point and felt it start to go and navigated the ship out of the channel so that traffic would be able to come and go without being blocked. And at one point, as the ship's on its side, he had wedged himself between some cabinets and a compass stand, is the easiest way to put it, and was coordinating on the radio with the tugboats and everybody else to keep the ship out of the channel and the other ships coming and going. Wow. You know, as far as the pilots in it, my understanding is that guy did a fantastic job. Lessons to be learned, you know, it would probably going to be more on the loading of the vessels and how that ship was loaded. But again, you know, I haven't looked too heavily at any of those case reports or anything like that.
Thank you.
So basically you're saying, Captain Poole, just like with an airplane, when they're loading a cargo airplane or loading a ship, it's all about the center of gravity and everything else comes into play. You don't just throw things on and go. You have to make sure everything goes in the correct location, right? Correct.
And especially, I mean, that was a car carrier. So when those start going and the chains start popping that secure the trucks to the deck, things get interesting in a bad way fast.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much, Captain Poole, and thank you very much, Laura, for your presentation.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting things to find out, at least for myself, and I'm sure other people also, as to how the harbor pilots operate. Thank you very much.
Very.
You're welcome.
The opportunity. Have a wonderful rest of your meeting and day.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next item we have is FDOT's Northwest 36th Street multimodal study. Carlos Castro from FDOT will be starting us off, and as I said yesterday, I'll give him a little prompt. This is his third straight day doing this item. He did TPC on Monday, he did BPAC yesterday, and now he's doing FTAC today. So.
All right. Yeah, and thank you, Kevin. And we had also the opportunity to present to CTAC
that's right, last week.
Last week, the citizens version of these subcommittees and advisory committees. But again, thank you very much for the time you allowed us to come out here and present to you. This is a multimodal core analysis. Today, I'm wearing a little bit of a different hat. You know, obviously, I still drive the freight mobility gospel, but in this case, this effort is multimodal. And certainly, we are trying to concentrate with this committee on elements that are related to freight mobility. But let me present the team real quick. I have with me Daphne Spanos, our consultant project manager with EXP Services. We also have a member of our team, a sub-consultant team here from ISC. That's our community outreach specialist, Maria Alzate. Unfortunately, she's unable to join us today. We heard some wonderful news over the weekend that she had a baby. So
oh my gosh,
congratulations to her. So somebody else is going to be taking over, but here's a goodwill message of congratulatory message to Maria for having the first child. Let me get into the agenda and talk to you a little bit about the effort itself. It's a multimodal corridor analysis. It's pretty lengthy, right? It's a planning level assessment, and it's almost 9 miles, specifically 8.6 miles in length. We're analyzing the corridor on 36th Street from the Palmetto, State Road 826 on the western end, all the way out to the east to US 1 or State Road 5. So it's pretty lengthy. So we kind of broken up the corridor in two pieces. The next slide, I'll talk to you about some of the items on the agenda, if you can advance it. But anyway, so we've broken up the corridor in two pieces I mentioned. We're looking at the western segment, if you're familiar with the area, which I'm sure you are. This is right behind the airport. Western segment we're calling Palmetto to the Iron Triangle area or Lejeune 42nd Avenue. And then we have the other piece that we're segregated and we're looked at from Lejeune all the way to US 1. Again, it's planning level assessment, and we're going to give you a sense and a little bit of a flavor of the solutions that we're looking at for the quarter. We're not favoring at any point any other concepts or solutions this time. We have some proposed alternatives, and they're very broad strategies for the quarter. And as I stated, we'll concentrate on the western segment, the area that has the large frame mobility element, and we'll show you some, cross-sectional views or typical sections that are going to illustrate the potential solutions. All right. We've had, as we talked a little bit before, we had the opportunity to meet with stakeholders, subcommittees from the TPO, CTAC on last week, Transportation Planning Council on Monday, BPAC yesterday, and today again we're here with you folks. Obviously, we're hearing a little bit from different committees, different stakeholders, different opinions, different visions, different ideas for the quarter. Of course, we heard from bike and pedestrian side yesterday, right? That may be a little bit different than what we're going to hear from it, which is fine. Our job is to look at the entire quarter, look at potential solution from different modes. So we give our consultants some direction to look at broad strategies. We don't, as I mentioned also, we're not favoring any specific solution at this point. We're collecting information. We have those strategies outlined. We need to look at future traffic as well and see how those play out with the solutions that we're proposing. Dating back to last year when we began the effort in April of last year, we had a chance to have an initial public workshop in September of last year. Up until recently, back then we have collected data, we have performed our existing conditions analysis, and now we find ourselves in that proposed conceptual development stage of the planning effort. And that's what we're here to present to you. For obvious reasons, of course, we want to hear from you, your comments, your thoughts. I know John has seen this material before since he was part of one of our project advisory team meetings. But there's some potential areas of improvement on the frame mobility side. We want to hear from you. So now let me kind of jump into the location map. And actually, before we get into location map, just remind the audience, right, as I stated before, how we conduct business at the agency. And we find ourselves in the planning stage on the left-hand side here in blue. That's where we are right now. It is our hope that, we may come up with some solutions that may make it down the line to some tangible construction projects. But we're far from that point right now. There may be some solutions that could be quickly implemented without some of the phases in between, PD&Es and so forth. That may take a little longer. But another point to bring up to your attention, again, as you're familiar how we conduct business, is the public engagement side of our business. At every step of the way, as we proceed to deliver infrastructure projects from our agency, we have the public engagement component. One example is, the efforts that we have outlined, the subcommittees. Back in May of this year, we met with elected officials, briefing them. We held our project advisory team meetings with key stakeholders that include, municipalities, City of Miami, unincorporated Miami-Dade, our friends and partners from the Expressway Authority, Miami International Airport. So we have a pretty large list of stakeholders that are advising the department and providing subject matter expertise on the subject. So let me get into the project location map now and illustrate what I mentioned here. So here it is, Palmetto all the way to US 1 to the east. And we've broken up the effort, as I stated as well. The western segment eastern segment, we have that little piece in between the Iron Triangle, which will give you a summary of one of the long-term solutions out of a separate effort uh, that our department and our agency has recently wrapped up, and that's what is called the Iron Triangle Planning Study. So let me pass it on to Daphne Spanos now, our consultant project manager, to talk a little bit about the milestones, and then talk about purpose and need as well, and then get right into the presentation material to meet with those cross-sectional views or typical section views that are outlining and illustrating those potential solutions for the corridor. And certainly, as I stated, we'll stick to the western side of the corridor. We'll show you one or two slides that show you the potential solutions for the eastern segment, but the main focus is going to be on the western segment. So Daphne, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Carlos. As Carlos mentioned, this is a summary of what the public outreach that we've held so far along the corridor. The study did start last year, and we have held project advisory team meetings. Some of you are on our PAT meetings. You attend those. We also met with the freight community back in November, and we recently held a public workshop last month, and we presented the strategies that we're showing you today. We're going to come back to the public at the end of August, early September, to get feedback on the alternatives. And in this study, there's always a no build or do nothing alternative. There's also 2 build alternatives and a transportation system management and operation alternative, which we'll explain a little bit further. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose and need of this study? So the purpose is to look at the multimodal improvements to forecast future needs along the corridor, and also to balance and see how we can address freight mobility. And the needs are to improve system linkage, capacity, transportation demand, social demands, economic, modal interrelationships, safety, and roadway deficiencies. So there's really a lot of needs to address and to balance out here. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in addition to the 2 build alternatives and the no build, we're also looking at transportation systems management and operation strategies, and that's looked at on a standalone alternative, although components of these TSM&O strategies could be embedded even in build alternatives. And some of the bank of strategies mentioned here for freight, like our freight signal priority, better wayfinding, signalization improvements, a virtual freight network. So some of these TSM&O strategies help the freight mobility. Some of them are helping vehicle movements, and some help bicycle, pedestrian movement, and transit as well. Next slide, please. So again, the freight mobility strategies, there's a whole slew of freight strategies that we can look at, from a planning to a traffic management to a technological standpoint. And those are some of the things that we are examining, especially on the western segment of this corridor, which we're referring to as 826 to Lejeune, because on that section, the freight movement is higher than in the east as we go from Lejeune to US 1. Next, please. So we should mention that 36th Street is an intermodal connector of the National Highway Freight Network. So it's a facility that's designated and recognized from a national standpoint. And basically what that means is that the facility of 36th Street from 826 to 67th Avenue can qualify for additional freight funding that can support freight mobility. Next slide. So this map here is showing the annual average daily traffic. And we're highlighting here in the boxes the AADT, or the traffic in the western segment, and a little bit in the east we're showing. But as you can see in the western segment, especially as we said, from Palmetto to Lejeune, the AADT, or the vehicle volumes, are higher, and the truck volumes are particularly higher in this segment. I think the highest one is about at Lejeune, and at some points it's hovering around 10% of the traffic is truck traffic. Next slide. Oh, sorry, we have some information coming in there.
good special effects in there. I had not noticed that before, Daphne.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to drive the corridor, so to speak, from west to east, and we're just showing you a snapshot of some of the typical sections that we showed to the stakeholders in the PAT meeting and the public workshop. There were more typical sections that we showed, but for the sake of time, we're kind of summarizing just a few of them here for you today. And as Carlos mentioned, these are strategies that we're looking at as we move through this process, both from an engineering perspective, the public involvement input, looking at the traffic forecasting. We're going to be further refining these typical sections to see which of these strategies can work. So again, these are not set in stone yet. We're going through a tiered process to refine what we're showing you here. So here, this section is from 826 to the FEC Railway Hialeah Yard. You can see the top typical section shows the corridor, 6 lanes total with bike lanes and sidewalk and 40 miles per hour. On the bottom, what you see is a combination of strategies that could be implemented either in a standalone measure or they could be implemented in a combined fashion. In other words, we have the multi-use path being shown there on both sides of the street. The outside lane could be repurposed or used for business access, transit lane, or BAT lane. And then there's also opportunity to look at freight signal priority, either in the interior lanes or on the outside lanes. So again, these are some concepts that could be implemented either standalone or in combination in tandem. And we are here looking at strategies that try to keep the improvements within the existing right-of-way. The next slide is showing an elevated section. And the reason why we're looking at the potential for an elevated concept is because at 72nd Avenue, Miami-Dade, this intersection has been noted not only for a high bike head crash location, but also for a high vehicular crash location. And as well, in previous studies, it has been identified that there is a concept to have an overpass where 36th Street goes over Miami-Dade that to help with traffic congestion. At Miami-Dade or 72nd Avenue, there are heavy northbound left turn volumes and southbound left turn volumes. So the thought here was that instead of just potentially having a grade separation or an elevated section just at that intersection alone, why not consider carrying it from the FEC Hialeah Bridge to 826, which also aligns with this section of the corridor being on the National Highway Freight Network. So as you can see here, the elevated section, we're showing truck only lane, but really that could be a general purpose lane. It does not have to function as a truck only lane. And you might think about the Northwest 25th Street Viaduct, something similar in nature to that. And underneath, we could maintain the 4 lanes of traffic, or we could probably squeeze in the 6 lanes of traffic that are currently there. So it would basically be like a 6+2 capacity in terms of the +2 being the elevated section. We're also trying to maintain having the provision for a multi-use trail or path on both sides, as we feel that that could possibly be a safer option than having the bicyclists in the roadway. We can move to the next one. So again, we're heading now further east along the corridor here. This is at the bridge, the FEC Railway Hialeah Yard Bridge. And there are 6 lanes, again, total on this segment. Along the bridge, there are sidewalks on the north side, and there's bike lanes on the bridge. However, on the south side of the bridge, there's no sidewalks. So there's an opportunity there for us to look at providing those sidewalk facilities on the south side, as well as carrying the freight signal priority throughout the typical sections. And this is showing it along the bridge and the inside lane. We can move to the next one, please. This is the section of 36th Street now in front of Virginia Gardens and Miami Springs between 67th Avenue and 57th Avenue. We did meet with our stakeholders, including Virginia Gardens, Miami Springs. We had a lot of feedback from them. And again, we're showing the mix of strategies of the freight signal priority along 36th Street, as well as that added lane for a business access transit, a BAT lane, and also multi-use trail. However, we did hear some feedback from the municipalities about the potential of putting any sort of freight designated lane on Perimeter Drive, which is sort of functioning like that already. However, some of the feedback was to keep it more isolated on Perimeter Drive. There was also some feedback to have some greater separation from the north side of the road to the travel lane, and that multi-use trail that you see there would be basically accommodating some of that feedback that we heard. Next slide, please. We're moving further along here from 57th Avenue to South Royal Point Sienna Boulevard. Again, here we are in front of Miami Springs to the north and the airport to the south. And again, the typical section is similar to what you've been seeing in the previous ones, where we're showing freight signal priority in the median lanes and the potential for that bat lane on the outside lane, either through a lane repurposing of that outside lane or through a widening component of the existing lanes on 36th Street. And also showing again the multi-use trails. Next slide, please. So at this point, as Carlos mentioned, there is a parallel or separate study going on in FDOT that actually just wrapped up, the Iron Triangle study, and that is at 36th Street, Okeechobee, and State Road 112, where it sort of makes kind of a triangular shape geometrically. So this study looked at both short-term solutions, such as wayfinding, sidewalk on Lejeune, and it also looked at long-term concepts. So the long-term concept is what we're showing you here from that other study in red. And this is a new ramp flyover from State Road 112 to 36th Street to replace the existing ramp, and it would bypass the Lejeune Road intersection. So again, this is something that we're trying to look at how it would interact with this study, whether it would be wrapped into this study or proceed in parallel to this study. But it is a long-term concept that has been recommended. We've had a lot of feedback on this one from the municipalities as well as the public. Some positive, some pros and some cons, basically in terms of this potential option. So at this point, our typical section, we weren't really showing a change in the typical, except that potentially 36th Street and the median would need to accommodate a touchdown of State Road 112 into the median of 36th Street. Next slide, please. So that basically covered the west segment of 36th Street, again, 826 to Lejeune, and that Iron Triangle area of Lejeune and 112. As we move east, I don't think we're going to go into too many of these alternatives, but we just wanted to show you the east segment. In this section, the roadway of 36th Street is 4 lanes. However, there are some sections that are 2 lanes wide, so it varies between 4 and 2 lanes. And at this point, we're thinking that there is a possibility that there could be some lane repurposing candidates. The roadway potentially, when we look at the traffic volumes and such, if there is an opportunity that the lane could be repurposed on the outside lane to provide either a transit lane, a bike lane, or on-street parking, or a combination of that. So that's something that we'll be doing in parallel, a separate effort to look at if lane repurposing is a viable alternative. So what you see here is an example of that, of lane repurposing, taking that 4-lane section from 37th Avenue to 17th Avenue and using the outermost lane or the outside lane to have an off-peak parking. So basically it would function as a through lane throughout the day, and potentially it could be a parking lane at night when people are frequenting the restaurants and the nighttime life, night activities, clubs, wherever they're going at that time. And I think we can go to the next one. So again, we didn't focus too much on the east typicals because pretty much the freight mobility and freight needs are more in the western segment. So there were more typicals that we didn't really focus on today, but we rather focused for the FTAC committee on the west segment. But just to summarize, this is our project schedule. As mentioned, we recently held public workshops, and we're going to be coming back to the public as we refine the strategies that we've shown you in early September, late August, and you all will be invited to that, as well as the PAT meeting if you so desire. And then we will be making our final recommendations, having our final workshop in November and final recommendations at the end of November as well. And throughout the process, we conduct significant public outreach activities, and we're happy to talk to your committee at any point in time and have your input. So I think that's it. We'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Daphne. I don't see any hands raised. Any comments at all from the FTAC members or the general public? Going once, going so no comments about those exclusive truck lanes in the middle of the road?
John is laughing. I see his thumbs up. We heard from John, but before, so thank you for your input, John. Oh, wow. So,
you floored them. You're well done.
I don't know. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Bill has something. Come on.
Okay.
Yeah, one question. With the elevated roadway, what does that, it just strikes me as extremely expensive. What would you say is the traditional cost increase we're looking at?
I wouldn't be able to tell you right now, Bill, cost. One of the things that we do in these planning efforts, when we come up with recommendations, there's a cost element associated with a recommendation. So we're not there yet. Right now we have the broad strategy. But yes, you're quite correct in stating that those kinds of structures are very expensive. And, at times we discuss solutions, engineering solutions, and those are the easiest parts to come up with. I think the funding elements become the obstacles. And that's why, I don't know if you picked up on this, but that's one of the reasons why we kind of tease the funding element with the National Highway Freight Program and the designation of a portion of 36th Street into Miami International Airport's air cargo facility through Northwest 67th Avenue as our funding plan or funding strategy for any future improvements in that area as they relate to freight mobility. So I have a plan in place. We would have to see whether we have a feasible recommendation that would obviously need additional vetting, right? This is at the planning stage, as I showed you in one of these few slides. That certainly requires additional public engagement, a future phase on the project development environmental side, and so forth. So, but we're not there yet. But bottom line is costly, yes. Feasible, we're not there yet to let you know that whether we have a feasible and recommendable solution that entails a great separation. But I'm thinking ahead for the funding side, and that is using the National Highway Freight Program as the vehicle for that improvement.
Thank you. George, you have a question?
Actually, what I was going to say was that it was an excellent presentation. It was, very well articulated, easy to follow, and for a planning level presentation, it was very clear to me. Thank you. Great job.
Good job, Daphne. Daphne has been taking us through these presentations. We've been practicing profusely with our elected officials in May, met with the public, various stakeholder meetings, and now we find ourselves in front of you. So good. I think we made a concise presentation to deliver the message. And obviously, we're going to be coming back once we proceed in the next phases to take all the input and feedback and test the solutions with future traffic. That's the other component that I think is critical, and we'll have to move forward with that. And as Daphne pointed out, your schedule, we're going to be coming back sometime in September with those results and compare the future traffic analysis and the solutions and strategies that we're providing.
Especially that approach or landing at the iron triangle. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work there. So, but what I'm saying is at this level, I think it's
yeah.
It's a good,
and on that note, we have been extremely transparent to point that out. It's a separate effort from my agency, but it certainly has an impact on the quarter itself. We're actually working through those through our plan right now to figure out how we're going to proceed. Daphne sort of alluded to that point. whether we're combining feature faces or having standalones. In fact, our folks and our leadership is meeting with elected officials from the city of Miami Springs later on to talk specifically about the Iron Triangle, and that's and those future long-term recommendations, because they do have some concerns, to put it lightly, and that's noted. That's part of the process. That's why I also highlighted public engagement and public involvement. We're not working in a vacuum, right? There's certainly a public engagement component that I highlighted to make that case that we rely on our stakeholders, we rely on the public, on elected officials that represent a large portion of the public, of course, in that area, and certainly we follow the technical analysis to arrive at recommendations and conclusions to move forward. So,
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to go ahead. So as next workshop, as I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of the earlier was is going to be September 15th, 2021, and that's going to be in person. I will send you information regarding location and social distancing information and so forth as the time gets closer. That being said, thank you all for being here and participating. Time right now is 3:18 p.m. and have a good day.
Thank you.